It's a big deal to me if you don't know. Now you know I'ma change your life. Just put your hands in the air.
What's up, Kansas City? I'm your host, Glenn Brian Frizzell. Joining us today is a very special guest who I'm sure you will learn from immensely today. She is a longtime civic leader in the Kansas City area. What's up, Kansas City? Let's give a warm welcome to Mrs. Mamie Hughes Rodgers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, how was your Thanksgiving? Did you cook? Did a lot of the family come over?
It's a large family, so part of the family came over. But for once, I didn't cook. Last year and this year, my sons decided that I had given my time, and so I could just rest.
How nice
now,
of you.
Sean did most of the cooking this year.
Awesome. And can Sean cook?
Oh, yes. Now, see, his father was a good cook. His grandfathers, he had two grandfathers, and of course they referred to themselves as chef. They said the world's best cooks are chefs, and they are men. I won't deal with that any further.
When you learn from the best, you're expected to perform the best. Now, I understand, Mrs. Hughes, you grew up in Florida, and your parents and your grandparents' education stemmed in your family, going all the way back several generations.
That is correct. I was born and raised for a while in Jacksonville, Florida. And my mother and father were teachers. My grandmother and grandfather, my mother's mother and father were teachers. Now, my father's parents were not teachers. In fact, my father's mother was, as I have heard, illiterate. But her husband, my paternal grandfather, was very well read and very well educated. But that grandmother decided that all of her children would not only read and write, but would go as far in school as they wished, and she supported them in that.
Amazing. Now, you're in Jacksonville, Florida. I assume that's not too far from, I'm a big Zora near Houston's fan, and I understand she was born and raised in Edenville, Florida. And the Florida area region has a lot of folklore and a lot of community aspects. I understand that you knew James Weldon Johnson, and your family also knew Mary Cloud Bethune.
Absolutely.
How was it growing up with those legends in your...
Well, now, I did not
reach?
grow up with James Weldon Johnson. My grandmother taught at the school when James Weldon Johnson was principal.
Okay.
Now, James Weldon Johnson was principal, teacher, principal, poet, and lawyer. And he practiced all of those things. But when he was a teacher in Jacksonville, Florida, at what was called the grammar school, that is when he wrote the poem. We call it Lift Every Voice and Sing, but it was Negro National Anthem. And his brother, J. Roseman, wrote the music. Their mother was a musician, and J. Roseman wrote the music. And when it was complete, they did it. They had a performance for 500 children in that Jacksonville area. And it was just a one-time program. And of course, I guess it was the birth of Negro History Month, because the song, of course, never died.
No.
And over the years now, it has become that first sentence, lift every voice and sing. But there's another interesting story about James Weldon Johnson. During the time that he was principal, that grammar school only went to the 8th grade. And he thought more and more about the fact that those children were capable, they were able, and they needed to have 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades taught. That he was able to get permission from the superintendent to attend one of the white high schools, and he made note of was able to get that established in Jacksonville for black children to go to high school. And that is why when I went to high school, it was then Stanton High School and no longer Stanton Grammar School.
Excellent. Now, Mrs. Hughes Rodgers, your parents who taught, both were FAMU graduates. And in a little while, we'll talk a little about your viewpoint on HBCUs and their relevance.
Yeah.
But you chose Fisk. Now, what attracted you to Fisk, which is a black college in Nashville, Tennessee, versus going to FAMU in Tallahassee, Florida?
And can I just start by telling you Fisk University, the oldest historical black college, the first one.
Well.
Yes. My parents did go to Florida A&M. Now my father had to go from the ninth grade through high school and then through 4 years of college. Now ask me why. Because there were only 4 black high schools in Florida: Miami, West Palm Beach, Jacksonville, and Tallahassee. Now Tallahassee, FAM College at that time had the high school and the college. And so my dad was able to go there to the high school and then go through college. When you hear that story about John Buck O'Neill, he was in Sarasota. Weren't any black schools, high schools there, and he went to Jacksonville to do his high school training.
And then when it came time for you to graduate from Stanton,
yes,
you chose the first black college.
I didn't do the choosing.
Oh, no?
I just assumed that it would be Florida A&M because my mother and father had been there. My cousins had attended, and in fact I had gone to visit one cousin, one I just admired and adored, Sarah Mae, and I went to see her when I was a freshman at Stanton and she was a senior at Florida A&M. Well, my mom went to Fisk in the 40s, early 40s, maybe 30, and she learned about, quote, the Fisk woman. And somehow I guess that's what she wanted me to be. And when I was aware, she had filled out an application, and I was going to Fisk University. Yeah.
Now, Mrs. Hughes Rodgers, Fisk is an excellent institution steeped in black culture.
Right.
When did you earn your BA?
Pardon?
When did you graduate?
In 1949. I went there in 1945, graduated in 1949.
Excellent. And you became an elementary school teacher, I understand.
I did.
Now, what are your viewpoints in terms of today's education system? I know it's a completely different world. We have completely different issues. Are the issues still the same?
The issues have not changed, but the manner with which we deal with those issues is what has changed. One thing for me when it comes to education is the involvement of parents. Whether it's a single parent, and sometimes it's men, sometimes it's women, single parents, they can be and should be a part of their child's education. It can give them the support and the comfort that they need. It gives the teachers the support and the comfort that they need. And it gets a lot of things done.
Now, you were a stay-at-home mom for a while, and from 1972, I'm reading because I want to get this right, to 1978, you served as Jackson County legislator for the 4th District, which includes residents that lived within the boundaries of 9th and 39th Streets and Truth and Jackson. How did you get involved with the Jackson County legislature? What
Now, I'll
prompted you to run?
correct you on those dates because it was 72 that I got elected and stayed till 78. But my husband Leonard had been interested in our people, black people, being involved, learning how to vote and elect our people who knew about us. He grew up, excuse me, we grew up in times when, for instance, here in Kansas City, there were white people who ran, white people, mostly white men, who ran for office within our districts. One, there was no opposition, and people like Leonard, who knew Leonard Jordan, and some other men, and the women, some of us were back in the house, but listening to them and giving our input. But they talked about the fact that we needed to get into that picture, and whatever that meant, learning how to get to apply for candidacy and to get the people in that particular area organized and run
It's
for
just
that
not
office.
enough to have the power to vote, but we need
We-
officers to vote for it.
Exactly. I need to know that somebody for whom I'm voting understands from whence I came, understands the circumstances in and around where I live, where we live. And it's not easy. It was never easy. But the heroes were willing to take it on. When Leon ran the first time, he didn't win, but it was like, okay, I learned something. And he began to talk about the formation of an organization. Okay, now what we need, Leonard, is more than just you and me and Howard the barber and a few others. Let's get an organization formed that, of course, was Freedom Incorporated.
And I should mention that your first husband, Judge Leonard Hughes, is remembered as being a co-founder of Freedom Inc., the political organization, and also as a Kansas City Municipal Court judge.
That is correct. Now, Leonard and Leon were two of the 7 people who founded Freedom. And it was Leonard Hughes, Leon Jordan, Fred Curls, Howard Maupin, Charles Moore, Marion Foote, and I'm leaving out the 7th one, but it'll come to me.
And there's a book that is going to be released here, I believe, later on this month by Dr. Micah Kubik, who's been a guest on this show, that'll refresh all of our memories about Freedom Inc. We do think it's important that we remember.
Well, when I
political
see the
process.
names written, then I know what name is no longer there, because there were 6 men and the one woman, Marion. And I did say Leonard, I said Leonard and Leon, and Howard Maupin and Charles Moore, Marion Foote and Fred Curls. Didn't know, was that 7? Oh well, we'll get it straight.
Now, Ms. Hughes Rodgers, I'd like to back up for a minute, if you don't mind. I understand that you were instrumental in picketing for rights of people of color to eat by picketing a downtown lunch counter in Kansas City. I wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about that, and also how you relate that to MU students picketing, not necessarily picketing, but boycotting and protesting their conditions on campus.
Well, all of us, blacks, but black women in particular, began to think about the fact that we could go in those department stores, we could buy clothes, but we couldn't try them on. And there were other, what we couldn't do. Now, there were water fountains there. Sometimes they had colored and white. Sometimes it was just white and they had some cups up there, which of course we said was pretty sanitary, because if we have to use the cups, we can toss that away. We don't want to just drink from that fountain. They ended up getting rid of that. And I had grown up in the 2 worlds, the colored and white. There were 2 of everything. But we we as women began to recognize we couldn't do this. Now, we're spending our money in these department stores, and what several of us recognized was there were 5 department stores that had restaurants. Can't eat in any of them. And there was a well-formed, wonderful women's group that decided, hey, we need to take some action. And so that group formed letters and sent to every women's club, and there weren't that many black women's clubs, that said, get your women out, come to a meeting, we're going to talk about how we can get organized. And it became CCSA, Community Committee for Social Action.
CCSA. And when was this? What years?
In the 50s, yeah, because by 1958 we had succeeded, but it
Amen.
took quite a lot. Now we say you are a leader because you have followers. And we were some good followers, and there were people, the ministers were very supportive, and people like Julia Hill, Velma Woodson, and others who had been active with NAACP, who knew about organizing and advocacy. So we've got support now. We've got these women who say, you tell us what to do, and we'll do it.
Now we have seen recent news headlines in terms of MU, the students, their protests that they felt that they were getting less than, they were getting subpar, being treated subpar by administration and faculty. What do you think about those particular headlines?
I think that over the years, we have not been heard. We have not been listened to. And on occasion, there were a few people who spoke, but more and more, we are coming to a point where we realize they won't know if we don't tell them. And there is a decent, polite way to do this. And marching is decent, and it is polite, and it does say what we are protesting or what it is in which we believe.
Awesome. What's up, Kansas City? This is your host, Glenn Bryan Frizzell. We're going to pause right here, not rap, but pause, and come back shortly with part 2 with our guest today, Mrs. Mamie Hughes Rodgers. Thank you.
I'm IFBB Bikini Pro Cat Williams, and when I'm not working out in the gym, I'm searching the web on Cascade Media and What's Up Kansas City. So make sure you check them out.